Talktainment Radio Worldwide Sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
Live call-in talk show. Dial 1-877-932-9766 and join the conversation here on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
This is the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
All righty. Welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com. We go where you go, the world's greatest radio. You are in touch with the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is Radio the Way It Should Be Heard. Our topic today is refined white supremacy. Now, for those of you who have your books, you need to, you can look in the Word Guide if you want to, starting on page 330. And ending on page 333. That's in the Word Guide. That's in the Word Guide for a definition. But, of course, we're going to have Mr. Neely Fuller speak to that, address that, what it is, and how it works. As you remember that we are to stay on code in this confinement. And whatever you don't want to go to greater confinement. Okay. To get in contact with the show, you can call 1-877-932-9766. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, at gmail.com. If you'd like, you can also go to the YouTube channel, type in the word Talktainment, and then scroll down to Talktainment number 2, and then type in radio, and you are there. You can listen to the program, and you can view the program. You can also go to Facebook.com/Talktainment, and you can do it there, especially when it comes to the replay of the show. But the best way you can simply do is what you're doing now. Just go to the TalkTainmentRadio.com homepage and click on programs, and you're right there. Or actually just hit listen live, because we are live on the air now. Okay, I think that's out the way. Don't forget to donate. I don't know where we are on that. Maybe they will give me a number. I don't know. But anyway, that's it. Let's see here. We are, again, going to be talking about refined white supremacy, but I see that someone has called in already. So am I ready to take that call? Okay. Caller? You're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead with your question. Oh, wait a minute. Hold it. Let me introduce to some and present to others Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Mr. Fuller, I apologize. Good morning, and how are you?
No apologies necessary.
Okay.
I'm still learning, and we can go right ahead.
Okay. Caller, go ahead, caller. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please? Oh, okay. Caller's gone. Okay. All right. Mr. Fuller, we are going to discuss, and we'll be taking calls and Gmails also, but we are going to be discussing refined white supremacy. Now, when you wrote that in your book, and then you also put it in the Word Guide, to get us started, what is refined white supremacy, and how does it work?
Well, it starts with the four categories of stages of the white supremacist apparatus, the entire supremacy. Governments evolve in stages. I guess all governments evolve. They start off, in a certain way, and then they just keep going in a certain way, trial and error and whatnot, until they have what they call a formal, quote-unquote, government. And so the government of white supremacy, which has turned out, in my opinion, to be the strongest and most effective government that the world has ever seen, and the most powerful and the most refined. And it started, you have your 4 stages, in my opinion, called establishment. That's getting it started. Mm-hmm. And then maintaining it, just like anything that is invented, and governments are invented. You establish it, meaning you put your invention together, and then you maintain it once you get it running like a machine.
Yes.
And then you expand it, meaning you try to make it, say if you're producing automobiles, you make more and more of them, and then you refine it while you're expanding.
Okay.
Refined it means the finishing touches. You say, how can I make this better? Make the engine run smoother. Check the oil and see if we are using the right type of oil in the engine, and check the engine itself, and check the transmission, and check the wheels, and check the steering mechanism. The steering mechanism seems to be a little bit stiff and a little hard. Maybe we can come up with an easier way for maybe people who are kind of weak to steer it, and so that you can hold the road easier and whatnot, and your arms don't get tired. I'm trying to make an analogy here.
Yes, sir.
Saying the system of racism, comparing it with what we might call a car.
Okay.
So the refinement stage of white supremacy is the finishing touches. You get it all running, you establish it, you get it maintained, you iron out a lot of the trial and errors and whatnot that you make, because you make in any invention, you have a lot of errors, a lot of flaws, so you iron those out. And then you try to expand it. That's the 3rd stage. And then refinement is the finishing touches.
Okay. The
paint job.
Mm-hmm.
Getting it out there on the showroom floor.
Mm-hmm.
And even the advertising of it.
Okay.
See, this is all a part of the refinement of white supremacy. Hey, this is the wonderful system. Everybody should buy into this, because this is the greatest thing ever. Mm-hmm. This is a wonderful product compared with all other products, and you will find that this product works better. Now, that's what the white supremacists do with the system of white supremacy.
Okay.
They go out and tell the entire world that they have the finishing touches now all completed, and it's a smooth-running machine, and no one should interfere with it because it's the best thing ever thought of.
Okay. Now, that's the basis that we are going to have our program on, refined white supremacy. That is the subject or topic, whatever you want to say. And remember that when you ask your questions, remember that we are in a counter-racist compensatory code mode. And your question should be thought of and asked in that way. With that in mind, we take this caller. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Mr. Fuller.
Yes. Greetings. I was calling to get Mr. Fuller's thoughts on the Amber Geiger decision that took place, I think, yesterday, and what is also some of his thoughts on how to diagnose the situation in a codified way.
Mr. Fuller?
Well, I just take it for what it is. Judgment was made against the officer who claimed that she made a mistake, and said you didn't make a mistake, it was deliberate, and that you had malice aforethought or something like that, whatever the ingredients are in a charge of murder, which I don't know what they are in that particular circumstance. I would have to look at the actual charge and see if it matched the words, and then I could come to my own conclusion. But apparently, someone looked at all of the circumstances, all of the facts that they had available, and it was determined that she was guilty of murder. I don't know whether it was first degree or second degree. I didn't read anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone knows, but that was the determination by a jury, I understand, of 12. So that was it, that she was guilty of murder in that particular case.
All right. What was the second part of your question, sir?
Is there any counter-racist codified thoughts that he would have connected with this particular incident?
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Well, there have been a lot of killings, and there still are. As we speak now, there will be some. And connected with law enforcement officers, when it comes to people of color, lots of killings. And maybe there might be some white people who are overruling the white supremacists. I mean, and some white people who might be white supremacists themselves, who have looked at all of this killing and say that they're going to start making some white sacrifices behind it because it's not good for business, the business of racism. And then there are other white people who just simply think that it's not the correct thing to do, that you shouldn't kill people unjustly. You should have a just reason for doing so.
Yes.
In other words, no more racism. There might be some white people who are saying, hey, get rid of all the racism, and you can start with some of the misconduct of law enforcement officers. That might be the message. I don't know. We'll have to see how it all plays out, generally speaking.
Right. Now, you mentioned, you just used that term, were they law enforcement officers or were they race soldiers? Or was she a race soldier?
Well, apparently it was deemed that she was, I guess, it was racially motivated, or even if it wasn't racially motivated, that her response to what was going on was not the correct response, and that it was done deliberately.
Okay.
That seems to be the judgment that was made. That the killing was deliberate and very unnecessary.
Okay, got it.
You know, I don't have all the details on that. I mean, like the jury did.
Yes, sir.
But that seems to be what the conclusion was.
Okay. Now, speaking of the jury, before we take this next call, could the correct or one of the compensatory responses be concerning the jury and their decision? Could it be, just so that we stay in the compensatory, counter-racist compensatory mode, would it be correct to say they did what they did?
Yes.
Meaning the jury. They did what they did. If somebody asked that question, like the gentleman just did to you, would a correct compensatory, counter-racist compensatory response would be, they did, being the jury, they did what they did?
They did what they did. That would apply to the victims of racism,
yes,
who were on the jury.
Yes.
Okay? That would mean non-white people.
Okay.
Any non-white people. That wouldn't apply to the white people because they're not victims of racism.
Exactly.
If there are any white people on that jury, then I could say that they made their judgment based on whatever they made it on, and they can step forward individually and say what they based their judgment on.
Okay.
But the victims guaranteed qualification.
Okay.
Any way that they went with it, they did what they did.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get.
That's the non-white people.
That's the non-white
They are the victims of racism.
Okay, good.
All non-white people are victims of racism.
Okay, because we got to stay in that compensatory, counter-racist compensatory code mode. Okay, let's take this caller before we take our first break. Caller, you on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please?
Yeah, Mr. Fuller. How you doing, Mr. Bobby?
Good, sir.
Yeah, under the refinement of white racism and white supremacy on page 239.
Of what book, sir? Of
Hello?
the what are you in the revised expanded edition?
Yes, sir.
Okay, page 239.
Yeah, on the refinement of racist man, racist woman. With the AIDS virus so rampant now, they give us the so-called African American the disease, and then they try to cure us from the disease. The epidemic in Atlanta, 70% of the black women is tested positive for HIV, and all throughout the country. They systematically give us the disease and then try to cure us from the disease.
So what is your question for Mr. Fuller, sir?
Yeah, the same thing that's been going on for hundreds of years. They give us the same thing they did to the so-called Indians. They give us the food and then poison us with the food. So in a system of white racism in the refinement stage, we're going to expect a lot of that from now on with the Ebola and everything else, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, they do that. That's a part of the racial tailoring apparatus.
Yes.
In other words, they look at the numbers of non-white people in any particular place and time, and they say, well, let's look at the non-white people in the in the valleys of the Amazon, or in the forest of the Amazon, rather. And it seems like the population is kind of exploding there at this particular time. So let's poison the water. I mean, and let's see to it that their food sources are inadequate or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll dry up some of the rivers and whatnot where they usually get their food. And they will, that will reduce the population there, because if we allow that population to expand, it will interfere with some of our operations there. So let's get rid of that segment of non-white people in the Amazon. And they do this all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on an ongoing basis. So this goes with the territory. It's called racial population tailoring.
Okay.
They're not trying to exterminate the non-white people of the planet, but just like you raise cattle or anything, I mean, you'll say, well, there's too much overgrazing here because we got too many cattle located in this particular place, and it's going to cost too much to transfer them to another place. So let's just kill them off. And so in the case of cattle, they just shoot them in the head, and then butcher them and sell them as meat. But in the case of non-white people, they just poison them quietly, poison the air, poison the water,
mm-hmm.
or cut off the food sources. They have all kinds of ways of doing
mm-hmm.
what they call population tailoring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a given anyway under
Yes,
the system of white supremacy.
Yes, sir. Okay, TalkTameItRadio.com is a 24/7, no-charge worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Now, here's a few that I'm going to share with you. Let's start off with All in the Family with S. Yolanda Robinson. The Conversation with Don Carina, and the Quay Morgan Hill Show. Now, all of these particular programs are, you can get them on TalkTameItRadio.com only. That's what we have. As a matter of fact, if you go to the TalkTameItRadio.com homepage, all these shows are there and they're exclusive to us. And what you might need to do, as a suggestion, is give a sample listen to each one of these programs to see if you like it or if you don't like it. You're not going to like everything, but that is the only way you're going to understand if you see what it is and how each one of those programs work, particularly when we stay in the compensatory mode while we are in this confinement. Remember the words. Anyway, all that can be done by going to the TalkTameItRadio.com homepage. Click on programs. There you are. All that from talktainmentradio.com. That's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And our subject or topic today is refined white supremacy. And Mr. Fuller has defined it. The last caller indicated that it was also on page 238 of the revised expanded edition of Mr. Fuller's book, which he will describe to you in detail at 45 minutes after the hour. And that caller, by the way, speaking about all those diseases and things like that, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Sebi, S-E-B-I, but the AIDS virus has been cured a long time ago, but for monetary reasons, it's presented in a different way to generate income. But anyway, remember, we're in confinement, so keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to the caller. Caller, you're on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
It's such an honor to speak with you, Mr. Fuller. My question is, given the history of these people and of white supremacy, do you think they will come to any type of agreement to produce justice? And I have two questions.
Mr. Fuller?
The question is, can we come to some kind of agreement?
Yes, or some type of agreement with the people of non-black people. Would they come up to have some type of agreement with us to produce some type of justice for the world?
You're asking, is it possible for white people and black people to come to some type of agreement throughout the world?
Yes, sir.
That will work, I guess, presumably, for the cause of justice, and which means doing away with racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's possible. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve, coming to an agreement. But how we get there is something we have to work out those details. And it should be done with all, well, I don't even like to use that cliche term, deliberate speed, as it has been used, because it hasn't been done with deliberate speed. It's been done with a lot of foot dragging. I mean, big time. In fact, hardly any movement at all compared to where it should be by now. So therefore, the victims, the prisoners of war, have to keep trying to not be prisoners and get back on the battlefield and do away with this entire system and replace it with a system of justice, which should have been in the first place. That thing called white supremacy or racism is a government that's very efficient and very powerful. It gets things done material-wise, but it is totally toxic when it comes to how to treat people. It is totally toxic in every regard. I mean, there's nothing about it that's not toxic when it comes to interaction between people. So it just should be done away with. And theoretically, what would be better than a system of racism would be a system of justice, which means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help.
Okay.
It's never been done, but it definitely should be tried, because that's the only logical system that should replace the system of white supremacy, which is the world government here in 2019.
Yes. Let's see here. Mr. McKeon of Great Britain, or the concept called Great Britain, or the concept called England, whichever way. Your Gmail is up next, but I have to take this phone call. So, caller, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Yes, Mr. Fuller, I had a second question. As I was looking on page 154 of the Independent Compensatory Code book, revised edition, you say that it's confronted by a suspected racist to consider yourself as being captured. I often think about that a lot, because I'm afraid to be captured by these people. So my question is is it constructive to be afraid, or like how am I supposed to conduct myself if I am captured by these people? How am I supposed to conduct myself in a manner?
Oh, okay. Mr. Fuller?
Oh, well, it's four things that you always keep in mind when you're confronted by a suspected race soldier, which is what we call a police officer, who is not really a police officer, but a white supremacist disguised as a police officer.
Yeah, pretending.
See, don't use the word you're anti-police. Don't use that term ever, that you're against the police. Or don't ever say that the police do harm to people unjustly. That a police officer, by definition, does not mistreat people.
Yes, sir.
Period.
Yes, sir.
So what you have is something else there. You got a person that's got a badge and a gun and a uniform, but that is not a police officer if that so-called police officer is mistreating people.
Yes, sir.
So you should have a different label. So that's a suspected race soldier if the person is mistreating people based on color.
Yes, sir.
That's the codified term, suspected race soldier.
Suspected
so
race
how you conduct yourself when you think you're being approached by a suspected race soldier rather than a police officer is don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. Now, there are logical reasons for that. You should assume you're already a prisoner of war.
In confinement.
In confinement already. You were born in prison. So it's not logical to fuss, to fight, or to flee behind these prison walls, which is what the whole world is for a person of color.
Absolutely.
All right, in the system of white supremacy. Where are you going? I mean, you're not going to, there's no such thing as a getaway point. I mean, that somebody's going to deliver you to another planet when you run. Or if you start fussing and fighting, you already know from experience or from what you've heard or seen how that's going to end. And it's not going to end in the favor of the non-white person.
Absolutely.
So what is the fussing, the fighting, or the fleeing about? It makes no sense at all. We need to learn from observation and experience. So what you do is just comply with whatever they say. I mean, no back talk, no acting like you got muscle that you don't have. No one is coming to your rescue. So don't put on any kind of show there. I mean, we're not in show business when we're confronted with this type of situation. A lot of black people have a tendency that, hey, it's showtime. And so we start performing like we're on a stage somewhere. Well, we're on a stage, all right, but that stage is a prison camp. It's a death camp. And what you're fixing to do is get dead real quick. If you fuss, if you fight, or if you flee, you have to make that assumption. Why? Because you are in a death camp in the system of white supremacy. That's what that is. It's designed to see to it that a lot of non-white people are dead. This is deliberate. And one of the points when you're most likely to be dead is when you fuss, you fight, and you flee from a suspected race soldier.
Let's take this caller. Okay, caller, you on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Hi, how you doing, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Neely Fuller?
Hey, go ahead, sir.
Lately I've been checking out the news, and I realized the usual suspects have this new gender, this third gender called non-binary. Could Mr. Neely Fuller expound on that in counter-racist?
What is it called?
Understand it? Non-binary. That's the third gender.
Non-binary?
Yep.
Okay.
They have the male, female, and non-binary. That's for people who want to be considered calling he, him terms and stuff like that.
Ooh.
They don't want to be called like he or she. They want to call they, he.
Non-binary. Mr. Fuller, that one got by me. You know anything about this?
I have heard the term. I do not know what it means. So the codified procedure is whomever uses the term should explain in detail what it means and what it doesn't mean. Those two things. That's any term, really. When people use a term that you are not familiar with, politely ask that person to explain in detail what the term means and what the term does not mean.
Okay.
What it applies to and what the term doesn't apply to. So non-binary sexuality, whomever uses the term, if someone uses that term to me, I will ask the person politely, what does that term mean in detail? Not just the definition, but I want in-depth detail about what a non-binary person does that a person who is not non-binary doesn't do.
Okay.
In other words, make distinctions.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have what?
Confusion.
Something that you don't want, and that is confusion.
Okay.
And the white supremacists are out now, all out, particularly in the area of sex, to cause massive confusion among the non-white people of the entire planet. That's one of their major goals. In fact, that is their major goal here in 2019. I mean, that if they can't do anything in the area of economics that they get maximum satisfaction from, or in the area of education or entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, or war, which is the whole thing, because it's all war.
Yes, sir.
The white supremacists now, it appears, according to the evidence, that they're going all out to completely butcher the minds, because everything starts with the mind.
Yes, sir.
Of the non-white people of the entire planet Earth when it comes to sex. And anything that they can do to cause maximum confusion when it comes to sex among non-white people, you see it everywhere, on television and everything. They are going all out. They have their foot to the metal.
Pedal to the metal.
Yeah, right. They have that pedal to the metal on that.
Yes,
they are
sir.
going on. They're going full steam.
Yes, sir.
And anybody who questions it, what they are doing, they immediately slap some type of label on them and just keep going. They just stomp all over you and just keep going. They don't want to listen to anything. They don't want to debate it. They don't want to have a discussion on it. I mean, just accept it for what it is because I say so. And they'll come up with all types of new labels.
Yes, sir.
Like we're just hearing this thing, non-binary.
Yes.
And they're going to come up with dozens more. I mean, the more labels, the more confusion you have.
Yes, sir.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
Okay.
Because they have found out, or at least the conclusion they've come to, if they can confuse black people sexually, they don't have to confuse them in anything else. Because everything else will fall in line.
Yes, sir. All right. Caller, I want to thank you so much. I'm going to have to go do my homework on that. Non-binary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Fuller, before we talk about your book, we're going to get to Mr. Macken from England. He wrote this, Mr. Fuller. He said, Dear Mr. Fuller, in light of recent video footage of the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau performing Harry Belafonte's Banana Boat song in blackface many years ago, this has reminded me of what you have said many times about the refined white supremacist and how they confuse non-white people every day by using friendly methods. Mr. Trudeau has built a reputation as a politician in Canada as being very liberal, whatever that means, friendly to the LGBT community and non-whites. Mr. Fuller, I would be grateful if you could talk about the methods of the refined white supremacist as you mentioned in your word guide. Regards, Anthony Macken from London, England, and I will leave a donation for the show. Mr. Fuller?
Well, if I understand the question, the white supremacists are refining white supremacists so it'll be more tasteful to the victims. It's like having a bunch of prisoners, and you say, well, the prisoners have been saying that we don't recognize, any of the holidays here in the prison and whatnot, and they want recognition of the holidays. I mean, you got a lot of holy days here. You got a lot of holy people here in prison, or people who consider themselves as being holy, and so they want to eat the foods that they eat on the holidays and etc. So the white supremacists will go to the drawing board and say, will this make it easier for us to control them here in the prison and make them more satisfied with being in prison? And if the answer is yes, now you're talking about the essence of the refinement stage of white supremacy. Have their victims embrace everything that's going on in the prison that the prison masters think of, so that therefore they don't think about rioting, they don't think about breaking out, that the prison, it becomes, like in the movie Shawshank Redemption, the character Red, played by Morgan Freeman, said that you become institutionalized. So the whole idea, the perfect situation and refinement of white supremacy is to institutionalize racism in such a way, in such a refined stage, that black people in the future would be saying, racism is a wonderful thing. And us being in the racist system and being the servants to the system of racism. I love being a servant to the system of racism. I love being whipped. I love being mistreated. I mean, it's like in this thing called sadomasochism or something like that in sex and whatnot, where a person wants to be whipped. All right, this is the refined stage of white supremacy, where the white supremacists actually, at a certain point, they can just go around with a whip. Every white person's got a whip, and they can just pass a black person on the street and just start whipping them, and the black person will start grinning and dancing while they're being whipped. I mean, they would like to see that. That's the white supremacist mind. I mean, hey, get them to love what's being done to them. Dump drugs on them. Dump everything that's derogatory on them, everything that's destructive, and have them embrace it. Not just the drugs, which they have already embraced, but everything that we do to them. Kicking them up and down the street. Hey, kick me again, master. I love that. That's a great feeling. Oh, I love that. Kick me again. That's the white supremacist mindset. That's the ultimate refinement of white supremacy. Okay. Yes, in answer to the question. All right. That's what they want.
That's what they want. Okay, TalkTameItRadio.com. We go where you go. Download the TalkTameItRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and we are discussing the the topic of the day, refined white supremacy. But it is at this particular time that we have Mr. Fuller talk about his book. Mr. Fuller, talk about your book, please.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the original textbook that's back up there now, 1984 edition, and the updated edition that is there, refined, expanded edition, the revised expanded edition of the basic textbook, which came out in 2016. And the book is directed toward victims of white supremacy. There's also a word guide. I tried to squeeze it into the expanded edition, but the book would have been just too thick for anyone to carry around. So I had to make another volume of it. But basically, they're the same book, the word guide portion of it, which a person can get the basic book without the word guide. I mean, that itself is will stand alone. But if they want the additional word guide, list of words, it's not a dictionary, but it tells you how to use words, what words to ask questions about if you're a victim of racism, how to best use words in all 9 areas of activity, according to compensatory codified definitions that will work best for you, suggestions of how to use these words. But you can get both volumes, all particularly the Revised Expanded Edition and the Word Guide, by going to producejustice.com. Now, some people want the 1984 edition too. I don't know why, but some people have said that, like at least several people have said, they understood the Revised Expanded Edition better by first reading the 1984 edition. I do not understand that at all, because most of what's in the 1984 edition is in the Revised Expanded Edition. But that's for the reader to decide, him or herself. And so you can get, I would recommend the Revised Expanded 2016 edition as the basic book that you get by going to producejustice.com.
Okay. All righty. We are discussing our topic today, refined white supremacy. And I'd like to say because I had to write this down, to D, Campbell, Mitro, and Warren. Now, Warren asked, I believe it was Warren, if it wasn't you, Warren, asked a question about non-binary, which I guess is a new term. And Mr. Fuller did address that maybe about 10 minutes ago on this particular program, and we're probably going to have to look that up. But he gave his Mr. Fuller gave his compensatory response to that. If you are the guy that called in or asked a question about that, in case go back and listen to what Mr. Fuller had to say concerning that particular term. Okay, let's see here. Let's go to D. D is from East St. Louis. Here's the question. It says, Mr. Fuller, I have a question. If white supremacy, if they have a code that allows them to dominate and mistreat people that are non-white, and the people that are non-white adapt a code to counteract the white supremacist code, wooing the white supremacists, would the white supremacists remain superior because they are in a dominant position? Thank you, and thank you for all that you do, Mr. Fuller. D.
Well, the white supremacists are supposed to be taken out of that dominant position. That's what the code book is designed to help the victims of racism do. I mean, we blatantly say that, just like they blatantly say that they want to remain white supremacists. And we're saying this is an illegitimate government. The system of white supremacy is an illegitimate world government. It never should have been invented. Why? Because it's designed to dominate and mistreat people, and no form of government should be allowed to dominate and mistreat people. No form. And the system of white supremacy has turned out to be the most efficient, most powerful form of government of dominating and mistreating people in the history of the known universe. It's the most efficient and the most powerful. Very efficient. And a person might say, well, since it produces so many wonderful things, why, Fuller, would you recommend getting rid of it? Because after all the scientific breakthroughs and whatnot that comes out of the system of white supremacy, and this is the truth. Lots of things have gotten done in a very efficient manner under the system of white supremacy. So what's the problem with it? The problem is, it's just like you have a factory that turns out a lot of wonderful things, including toys of all types, fascinating things, improvements over this and that and the other. But suppose the factory that you have set up leaves people by the millions dead. and poisoned, their minds and bodies. I mean, just racked with pain, and just left by the wayside, by the millions. That this particular factory, there's nothing built in. I mean, to help the people who are under this system, the people who you depend on to make the system go. But these people are just ground up into nothing. They're turned into nothing, turned into something completely worthless, something that nobody wants to be around, that they can't even stand themselves, which is what black people have become in this system. So you get rid of a system like that, and you replace it with something better. Now, what would be better, logically speaking? A system of justice, something that people have talked about for like forever. But no one has seriously tried to establish a system of justice. You've had every type of system, so-called system, that you can possibly name. But this thing about justice has never been actually seriously tried in recorded history. It's the job of black people to seriously try to establish that system, guaranteeing that no person, nowhere, ever, is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in every area of activity.
All righty. Okay, before we wrap up this hour, go ahead, caller. You are on with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Quickly, what is your question?
Yes, just a quick BGQ. I remember my parents growing up, and they always said that they preferred the South much better. They're both deceased now, and they said because back then white people were just in your face. I can't stand any niggers, and they would just say it plain, and you knew where they stood. Today there's lots more refined white supremacists where they'll have sex with, marry, adopt white black babies. And do you think that, Mr. Fuller, that might be a little bit more detrimental to the victims when they believe that white people are more kinder, gentler, because they're not throwing around the more conservative, aggressive white supremacist, I'd say Ku Klux Klan style of white supremacy?
Mr. Fuller?
Well, I don't quite understand the question, but
the question would be, the more refined white supremacist method today is to not go around saying, I hate you darkies, I hate you jungle bunnies. They're more kinder, gentler, but it seems like the damage is still there for black people. What is your observation?
Absolutely.
The damage is still there, even though they're adopting black babies, having sex with black people, marrying black people, and they don't say those bad words anymore. It seems the damage is still there. Is that your observation?
Yes, absolutely. The lady actually answered her own question. That's exactly what the refinement is. The refinement of white supremacy is to make the system of white supremacy tasty to the victim. I mean, don't call the black person names. The white supremacists will get on the unrefined white supremacists about that. That's why, little by little, they're throwing some of them under the bus. And they're saying, hey, talk nice to them. Promise them everything. Promise them everything. And give them nothing but what they have been getting or something worse. But promise them everything. Talk nice to them every day. Never use any kind of derogatory language. Never, ever do that. Always shake their hands. Bow down to them if necessary. Tell them how great they are. Talk about their history and whatnot, and how they had great empires and whatnot. Let them do all of that. I mean, clap your hands when they say something, and say, hey, that's wonderful. That's the greatest thing I've ever heard. I mean, where have you been all of my life? That's the refined white supremacists.
Refined white supremacists.
And then they go back down the road among themselves, and they laugh like you wouldn't believe, and say, we really got them going now.
Well, guess what? We've come to the end of the first hour. Thank you, by the way, caller. That was a very, very good call. Okay, we've come to the end of the first hour of the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. We are still going to be speaking about refined white supremacy, so stay tuned for the second hour. TalkTameRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, the way it should be heard. Stay tuned for the second hour.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTameRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTameRadio.com. Talktainment Radio, worldwide sound. TalkTainmentRadio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
Live call-in talk show. Dial 1-877-932-9766 and join the conversation here on TalkTameRadio.com.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTameRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
All righty, TalkTameRadio.com. We go where you go, the world's greatest radio. You're in touch with the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is Radio, the way it should be heard. We are into the second hour of our subject today, which is refined white supremacy. If you missed the first hour, make sure that you get that, because it was a very exciting and very good descriptions of it, good questions, as people are beginning to stay in the compensatory counter-racist compensatory code method in asking questions, which is good. That means you're still learning, as we all are. Okay, you can get in contact with the show by calling 1-877-932-9766. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. You can also just listen to the show as you are right now. Just go to the TalkTameRadio.com homepage and just click Listen Live. Baby, you are right there. Also, go to the YouTube channel if you want to see what's going on. I don't know why you would want to see me, but anyway, go to the YouTube channel, click, type in Talktainment, then type in Talktainment number 2, and then scroll down where it says radio, and you're there. Now, when you go to that site, hit the subscribe and like button right there. And finally, you can also go to the Facebook.com/Talktainment, and you can listen to the whole program all over again. Some people like to hear themselves. Okay. Let's go to the Gmails here. This comes from Mr. Campbell, and he says this. I have a question for Mr. Fuller regarding the production of justice. Lately in professional politics, the so-called, quote, Democratic Party, end of that quote, has a non-white candidate named Andrew Yang. Mr. Yang has proposed a freedom dividend. The freedom dividend, also known as Universal Basic Income, or UBI, that's Universal Basic Income, that Mr. Yang has promised to give all adult, quote, Americans, end of that quote, which comes to $12,000 a year, or a little over $3 trillion a year, considering that some believe that the Iraq war cost $1 trillion a year. Mr. Fuller, do you think a freedom dividend, or UBI, which is, he says, is universal basic income, helps to produce justice? Now, if yes or no, why do you, Mr. Fuller, think so or think not?
I don't think that would work.
Okay.
But it might work. Now, Mr. Yang presumably is a non-white person, so I have to say that he's entitled to VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. He's qualified to say just what he said. So he did say what he said. But if you address the question of, do I think a guaranteed income would do the job that needs to be done of helping the people who need help the most, and guarantee that nobody's mistreated in that establishment, I don't think it would work. But then what I think, just offhand, may not be adequate. It needs to be studied, probably tried on a sample basis to see how it would work, and see if it works. You go with what works. Mm-hmm. What works how? How do you know when something is working? When no one is mistreated. See, because we're talking about justice here. And everybody who needs help gets the most constructive help that you can possibly get. Now, if that guaranteed income, the way it is put by Mr. Yang, presumably, would facilitate that, then by all means, go for it. But that has to be tested. $12,000 it was, that the figure name?
Yes, $12,000 a year.
Now, offhand, that doesn't sound like that would do it to me. Because what will happen, I believe, is that immediately the prices of everything would go up anyway. Because the people who produce things set the prices for the things that are produced.
Yeah, the criminals.
Yes, and these presumably would be white supremacists because they control the worth of all money that is produced on the planet. They control the worth of it because they control the worth of all people who are non-white. Most of the people on the planet are non-white. Mm-hmm. So they control the worth of these people individually and collectively. So therefore, everybody would get, maybe if they got $80,000 a year guaranteed, then the white supremacists would just juggle the figures, juggle the money, juggle the products, and you would wind up right back where you started from, or worse off than you were in the beginning. Mm-hmm. If they just had a program where they didn't distribute money at all, but just gave you the things that money would buy, which is what I say is one of the fastest ways to take care of things. Just let people have access to the things that money will buy.
Yes, sir.
Even when it comes to reparations. Mm-hmm. Give us access to the things that you would use if you had money. If you had plenty of money, what would you buy? All right.
That's a good question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mr. Fuller, people maybe are beginning to wake up to see that we are actually in confinement worldwide. I happen to be looking at world news from different parts of the world, different concepts. For example, Africa, Germany, France, Hong Kong, China. And one thing, if people don't think that this is a criminal conspiracy worldwide, I looked at the same things that are going on over here in this concept called the United States, which is actually a corporation. The same things are going on worldwide. Criminals are in control. Unrest, particularly in Hong Kong, stuff that goes on here in America, Africa, the selling of babies, selling of black babies. It's terrible. Germany, problem. France, it's going on all over. So there is no escape. We are in confinement, and you must understand that, or else you're going to be totally confused. Let's go to the Gmails. Mr. Fuller, this comes from Warren. He says this. Can Mr. Fuller respond to how older cartoons like Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny, etc., program us to glorify killing, violence, and laughing at non-constructive forms of entertainment? Thank you.
Can I comment on it?
Yes.
That's the white supremacists believe in violence all the time. They teach this early on. I mean, the young lady sitting by the window waiting on her prince to come, and the prince usually comes in what? As a knight of some type.
Mm-hmm.
And what is a knight? What is a knight? Knight. He's the person that goes around killing people. That's what he does. He's not a farmer. He's not an inventor. They say knight in shining armor. Oh, my knight in shining armor. Now, people are taught that. Young people.
Yes.
Young girls are taught that at an early age. So they are saying to the young girl, hey, what you want is a warrior, a person who kills people, whose job it is to kill people, to go around, to travel, not just stay in one place. Knights in shining armor usually get on horseback, and they go great distances, sword in hand. They're not coming selling medicine and whatnot. They're not medicine people. And these are the heroes and the movies and all of the cartoons. Some of the first cartoons that I saw as a young person.
Yes, sir.
Was cartoons of a person maybe falling down.
Yes.
And hitting her head. And what would come up on that person's head? A knot. Or a person would hit another person over the head with something.
Mm-hmm.
And a knot would be on their head, and that was supposed to be funny. They call them comic books. But all through the so-called comic book is disaster.
Yes.
The Human Torch, the Submariner, Superman. One of the, I think, Action Comics way back in the 1930s. The first issue showed Superman what? Holding up a car. Like he was getting ready to toss the car at somebody. That was on the cover, if I remember correctly, of Action Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Put out by that publishing company of the first issue, which I think anybody who has that first issue, if they have it somewhere, it's worth a fortune now.
Millions of dollars right now.
Yes, millions of dollars. Superman, Batman, Dick Tracy. I used to read Dick Tracy. I'd make sure I turned to the comic page and read Dick Tracy real quick.
They used to be in the Sunday papers, didn't they?
Yes, and sometimes when they would pull out their guns and shoot, you would see the bullets going all the way through the person's head. That would be in the comic strip. Now,
yes.
This is a comic strip. This is supposed to be funny. But you walk into a bookstore right now, and most of the books are about what? Murder mysteries.
Murder mysteries.
Some of your most prolific authors, they say that this author has written more murder mysteries than anybody. He's written 97 books on what? Murder.
Killing.
Murder. Row after row after row. And if you want to find a book on how to do some woodwork, you probably have to go back to the back of the bookstore somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To the specialty table.
Mm-hmm.
But the general tables are full of people killing people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're passing by when you walk through there.
Yes.
Detective stories. The headless corpse. The body in the basement. Murder on the train. Murder on the subway. Murder in the alley. Murder in the Castle.
Who was that stabbing that woman in the shower? Oh, Psycho. Psycho, I think it was.
Oh, y'all just on and on and on and on. And they call them sometimes thrillers. Well, what's thrilling about it? Oh, somebody's getting killed. That's what's thrilling.
Yeah, there you go, asking a question again.
Yes.
Stand in the question mode. Okay. Let's do this before we go to our 15-minute break. This comes from Anonymous, Mr. Fuller, and it says this, good morning. It says, has Mr. Fuller read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, spelled T-Z-U? It states, among other things, that war is based on deception. Boy, that's right. This person, Anonymous, says, I found it very interesting and helpful in understanding the problems many non-white people face, particularly in economics. It may allow us to ask direct and constructive questions to help uncover deceptive tactics. Mr. Fuller, have you ever read The Art of War?
I've tried to read it, but I couldn't understand most of it, but I understood some of it. Like some statements I think that are in there, like, make a noise in the east and strike in the west. That's a part of what they call the art of war. In other words, deception, like someone said. You make a noise in the east, and everybody looks to the east, but then you hit the target in the west, because they weren't expecting that. Now, all generals understand that. You have to know the art of deception, or you might say the science of deceiving people in a war. You make your enemy think that you're doing one thing when you're doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all kinds of ways to conduct that type of war, sometimes without firing a shot.
Mm-hmm. Football is like that, Mr. Fuller.
Football is that way.
Yeah.
Boxing is that way. Now, chess is that way.
Yes, yes.
And checkers.
Yes.
Deception. You fool your opponent. Card playing.
Yes.
It's all about deception. You have to wonder what the other person has in his or her hand. I mean, they're not going to tell you. And so, you know, in the system of white supremacy, there's all kinds of ways to reinforce the concept of deception, because the system of white supremacy is a system of massive deception in all areas of activity.
Okay.
Economics, they deceive you in economics. You can't buy anything and be told the truth. How do you deceive people? By not telling the truth. And you get your victims even to become people who want to lie about things. So a part of the code is we should become, as best we possibly can, people who believe in truth.
Okay.
Because that's the best way to go about getting things done in the best manner.
All righty. TalkTameRadio.com is a 24/7, no-charge worldwide broadcasting facility with hosts delivering on various topics such as news, lifestyle, sports, law, health, wellness, religion, and politics. Now, here's a few that I'm going to share with you. Talking Sports Plus with yours truly, Mr. Bobby. Heard every other Tuesday here on TalkTameRadio.com. Stairway to Heaven. Man, I didn't meet Claude, but I met his wife this past Saturday, and we discussed it. And I'm telling you, you're talking about helps for women and men in all areas. This is the program that you really need to listen to, particularly if you've been incarcerated and you're having issues. They can help you address these issues and so forth. It was very, very, very good. And also Everlasting Life with Michelle Vanell. Now, listen, all these shows that I have mentioned and more are exclusive to TalkTameRadio.com, and all you have to do is go to the TalkTameRadio.com homepage and click on programs, and there is a list of the programs that Talk Tame It Radio carries. Now, after you look at that list, decide which one that you would like to sample, or if you would like to listen to the entire program. It's there, but the only way you're going to do it is if you actually click on it and listen to it and see if you like it or not. Sample it. That's all. Exclusively from TalkTameAtRadio.com. That's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby. I am the co-host on the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And he is addressing the question today about, about refined white supremacy. I want to tell you right now, your calls have been on point. You have really been on point, and that's good. And very happy for that. Mr. Fuller has been explaining it and giving definitions to that or suggestions to that, and take heed to those. This is the second question from Mr. Mario. We asked the first question last week. This one, because he asked three, this is the second one. Mr. Fuller, what criteria do you use when deciding between political candidates? How do you factor in non-white candidates who are anti-sexual or have a white mate?
Well, they're all victims of racism. All non-white people in the system of white supremacy come under the dictatorship of the white supremacists. So I just look at it for what it is. That's what it is. So we're all flawed, including the white supremacists themselves, simply by practicing white supremacy. That's a huge flaw. I mean, when you start talking about humanity, because there's no humanity there. So the victims are people who are in a status that you can't say should be. So you just look at it for what it is. We're just prisoners of war, and prisoners of war are expected to act like prisoners of war. And they do the things that prisoners do, or prisoners in general do. If you study any prison system, just look at what prisoners do.
Well, the Shawshank Redemption.
Yes, just whatever prisoners do, that's what black people do. And you can expect them to do it. So all the details of what black people do, you expect them to do it. Now, black people might say, well, I'm going to run for office and whatnot. But you're running for an office in a system of white supremacy. You're in a prison camp running for office. That's the way you look at it. So you're going to be a spokesperson for the rest of the prisoners, okay? And presumably you're going to be, if the prison masters say you also can speak for the warden, okay? Well, you can do that. If the warden says you can speak for him or her, so that's the way a prison is run.
Okay.
So you just look at it for what it really is, and that's all it is. They're just going through motions and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
So it doesn't make any difference what they say and what they do, because everything that a non-white person does or says, in order for it to come to fruition, is going to have to be okayed by the prison masters, who are the white supremacists of this planet.
Yes.
So you always know that when you just assemble or listen to the speeches and all like that, and no matter how they sound and all like that, it's always the prison master who is up in the tower looking down at the whole spectacle. And at all the people assembled out there listening to the wonderful speeches. And you have some black people who speak very well and who are sincere about what they're talking about they want to do or going to do and whatnot.
Yeah.
They are not going to do anything that the white supremacists disapprove of.
Exactly correct.
And so you can just expect that. So you can be excited about it, or you can yawn through it, because that's going to be the result anyway.
Yes,
whatever the white supremacists want is how it's going to all show up.
All right.
Why? Because we're in the system of white supremacy. We're not in any other system.
Okay.
There is no other.
1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7 Mr. Bobby at gmail.com, as Justice Soldier did. Here's the question, Mr. Fuller. It says, regarding refinement and deception, since so-called white people are capital letters N-O-T, not really white in capital letters, what else are they saying that is also not true, Mr. Fuller?
Since the white supremacists are saying that they're white when they are not white?
He says, regarding refinement and deception, he says, since so-called white people are not really white, what else are they saying that is also not true?
Oh, they're saying millions of things that are not true. And but if you have gotten in position where you can dominate people at will and mistreat them at will, and the people don't know what to do about it to put a stop to it, you can say whatever you want to say, which is exactly what the white supremacists do every day. They say whatever they want to say. They say that, well, I'm white. And as a prisoner of war, for example, I will tell the prison master, who are the white supremacists, well, you're not white. I'm looking at you. And you're not, I know the color white. I'm a painter. And I know what white paint looks like. And in your particular case, sir, you are not white. And the white supremacist, or the person who calls himself or herself a white supremacist, or says that he or she is white, and proceeds to prove it by saying, what did I say? I said I was white. Now, if all the other white people that I say are white say that I'm white, then I'm white. And what you say about anything with your black self in the system of white supremacy matters not at all. You have no voice, even though I give you a voice to say what you said, but it means nothing to me if I don't want it to mean anything except nothing to me. And since you don't have any power, what I say goes.
Yes.
Because that's the bottom line.
Okay.
And in answer to the question, the white supremacists always give you the bottom line. They'll say, what we say counts.
Okay.
What you say doesn't count. If we say that what you say doesn't count.
Okay.
Why? Because I can whip you and you can't whip me.
This one comes from our brother in the so-called French Guiana, Brother Mitro. He says this concerning black-on-black violence. He says, have you ever heard, Mr. Fuller, of a book by Amos N. Wilson called The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination?
I've never heard of the book. I've heard of Dr. Amos Wilson.
Okay. What do you know about the thing that you've heard about Dr. Wilson, or rather, Mr. Wilson?
I haven't heard anything except he's a black person who wrote a lot of books and was listened to by a great number of scholars and people in general who are classified as non-white, and they determined from his writings and from his speeches and etc. that he was very well, that he knew a lot about racism and how it worked, and presumably, I guess, said a lot about what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all that I've heard. I've never, I don't even recognize a picture of him. I've never even seen a picture of him, according to my knowledge, and I certainly have not read any of his works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not any of them.
Mm-hmm. But you have heard. I've never heard of. There's so many out there, besides yourself, Mr. Fuller, I guess, who are trying, if you will, to produce justice by different publications or magazines or whatever they have that are trying to help us to better understand where we're at. Somebody had mentioned earlier in the program about refined white races. Page 238 of the revised expanded edition. The question was asked, what is the ultimate goal of a white supremacist? And you wrote the answer, white supremacy. Racism, just as simple as that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The purpose of white supremacy is white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Dominating and mistreating non-white people based on color. That's it. And they get what out of that? What do they get out of that? People do things that they get something out of.
Mm-hmm.
They get fun, they get glory, and they get material comfort.
Wow.
That's something that everybody wants.
And it
just depends on how you go about getting it.
Okay.
And they have found out a way to get it in a way that satisfies them.
To the Gmails, it says this. This comes from Chris. It says this, Mr. Fuller, I was listening to you on another radio show last week when a woman asked you if you could comment on your father, who was a great man, and tell us of some of the things he did during the Tulsa, Oklahoma riots in the 1920s. Since the code is all about doing what works, my question is, what part of the code did your father, Mr. Fuller, use, and did it work for your father? Thank you very much.
Well, just briefly, if you're talking about my progenitor, people that you might call my father, he was a business person in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and he ran a business for about 40 years, roughly. And he had a cafe on 316 North 2nd Street in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and a 47-room hotel, and a meat market, and a pool hall, and there was some illegal gambling going on in the back of that, which he did not approve of, but he couldn't watch that very closely because he didn't approve of gambling. But the people who ran the pool hall would allow that because he couldn't watch everything, but he definitely didn't approve of that, even though that was going on. Anybody who is familiar with that era and at that time. And next door to that was a barber shop and a beauty parlor in the back of the barber shop. In other words, he ran about 6 businesses. Down the street from that was a place called H.N. Green's blacksmith shop, which he owned that business. But Mr. H.N. Green, who lived in the hotel in one room, ran that shop, putting shoes on horses and whatnot, making shoes for horses, because that was back in the horse and buggy days. And so he ran about 6 businesses all together, off and on. One time he was part of a cab company, and with a fellow named Mr. Culbertson, and they ran that business for a while before he went in, broke away from Mr. Culbertson, and decided to go into the cafe business and the hotel business full time. Now, I would say that the constructive thing that he provided, I asked him one day, I said, you call all your businesses People's Hotel, People's Cafe, People's Meat Market, People's Barbershop. I said, why do you call it People's when our name is Fuller? And he, almost with tears in his eyes, he said, because it's not about us, it's about the people. And that's the thing that stands out in answer to your question of the caller.
Okay.
About my father. He didn't have anything to do with Tulsa and the 1921 riots or anything like that. He was in Muskogee, Oklahoma. He was not in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The riots of 1921, the Wall Street riots, they called it.
Black Wall Street.
Yes, Black Wall Street, where that was all destroyed. That happened in 1921, and that was 60 miles away. And 60 miles at that time was like 1,000 miles or more, because people didn't travel very often in those days. You went mostly by buggy and horse and wagon back in those days. But the distinctive thing about my father that the lady was talking about was that he ran those businesses, and it was just a block away from where he had been a dishwasher at one time, and that was the railroad station there. And he, as a dishwasher at that railroad station, he said, the colored people have no place to stay when they come through here. They have to go out in the bushes and eat whatever food they happen to have. There's no place for them to eat. There's no place for them to stay. And he said, I'm going to do something about that. And so 1 block away from the railroad station, he was able to open up a 24-hour restaurant and hotel. It never closed. That's another thing that he told me. And that is, he said, Neely, we never close. That sign outside is always there. And when it gets dark, that's the only light that's lit up on this street, because we never close. People's Hotel and Cafe, so that the colored people can come through here and eat and have a place to stay all of the time. And so, in answer to the question, that's the summation of Neely Fuller Sr.
Okay.
I'm named after him, Neely Fuller Jr.
Yes, sir.
But the town died and the businesses died. That was the upshot of that.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask you, was that book, was that hotel and place on the Green Book?
It was.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, man. That's very interesting.
Oh, it was in the Green Book. Oh, yeah. You stop it. Count Basie's band and all, the bands that were popular at that time. That's where they would stay, because black bands had to sometimes span out all over town and then have a place of assembly later on, because they had to stay at people's houses. A lot of band members back in those days slept on the floors of people's houses, because there were no hotels for black people. There was no place for black people to stay on what they call the Chitlin Circuit.
Okay. Wow. That is very interesting. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to do that.
Well, I'll just, in answer to the question, I decided to answer it, but actually, that's a thing that I don't play up or anything like that. But it's the facts.
Okay, facts. All right, TalkTameRadio.com. We go where you go. Download the TalkTameRadio.com app to your cell or to your tablet. That's radio the way it should be heard. My name is Mr. Bobby, and I am the co-host on the Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. But at this particular time, we have designated for him to speak about his wonderful book. Mr. Fuller, take it away, please.
Well, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com, producejustice.com. And what this book is for is exactly what we are talking about today. How an individual person, an individual prisoner of war, a non-white person, can go about doing his or her best to counteract the effects of white supremacy and or eventually and hopefully in a rapid-fire manner get rid of it altogether and replace it with a system of justice, and how each individual can best facilitate that process. That's what the book is for. So far, it obviously has not accomplished that, or hasn't even put a dent in the system of white supremacy, but that's what the book is for. I'm hoping that the book will have that type of impact, and I hope that it will have that impact. Sometimes I would say I would like to see it done overnight, because I wrote it with that intention. For this system of racism that we're dealing with, not to just drag on into infinity like it has been, that we can put a stop to it through what I call codification, which is to empower each individual through the knowledge and understanding of the system of racism and what he and or she can do about it on a daily basis in all 9 areas of activity. How to think, how to speak, and how to act. When certain things happen, what to do and what not to do. That's what the book is about. That's how I tried to write it. I'm not nowhere near the type of writer that I should be, but this is what I wrote the book for.
Okay.
All the things that we're discussing here on this radio program. and that is what to do and what not to do in order to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice in the best possible manner, in the most constructive manner. You can get it by going to producejustice.com.
All right.
Producejustice.com.
All righty. Mr. Fuller, can you turn to page 238 in the Revised Expanded Edition? And at the bottom, after you gave the answer, the question was, what is the ultimate goal of a white supremacist, racist? And then you answered white supremacy, racism. Then in bold letters, could you read that part and then go through the notes, please?
Where I have that page what?
Page 238 of the Revised Expanded Edition. Starting
238.
Yes, sir. At the very bottom when it said there is reason.
Yes, refines it. It said, what is the ultimate goal of a white supremacist? Well, the answer is white supremacy. That's the ultimate goal. That's the goal within itself. Okay? And then it goes on to say, on page 238 of the Revised Expanded Edition of the textbook, when there is reason to believe that some of the same white supremacists, racist men and racist women, collectively, who offered to help non-white people, were also involved in doing harm to them. See, that's the duplicity, you might say, of the white supremacists. They are very confusing in doing that type of thing.
Yes, sir.
They will come like they did with the Indians, you know, as an example. They say, we're going to help you. You know, you shouldn't be hostile toward us. We came here to help you. That's why we came across this grand ocean and all like that. I mean, we want to be of help. We are helpful people. And with the things we'll introduce to you the things that you have never seen before. We will like in the case of Pocahontas, I mean, you know, we will take you back where we came from and let you see what we have accomplished where we were and all like that among ourselves before we met you. And so we can do these things for you, or even better, all right, if you just cooperate with us. And that's what the white supremacists do in what? The refined stages of white supremacy. They offer to help you when really they have another plan B under the table where they are going to do everything they can to make you submit to their domination and their slavery system. This is what their ultimate goal is.
Yes.
So there's reason to believe, as it says here on page 238 of the textbook, that some of the people who were said to offer help to the victims of white supremacy of this tragedy were white supremacists who caused the tragedy. All right? And that's the background of that, which everybody's very familiar with for the most part. Racist man and racist woman are the masters of deceit.
Could you repeat that again, please?
Racist man and racist woman, who are the white supremacists collectively, worldwide, are the masters, and this is in capital letters, of deceit. See, so in the refined stage of white supremacy, the main weapon that they have is deception. Deceive them. Have them believe in things that are absolutely not true, particularly when we are offering them something.
Yes.
And say that this is going to be of great benefit. I mean, we'll put out in 2019, we'll put out pharmaceuticals and say that this is going to help cure you of various things, knowing full well that they're going to get you strung out on something that's going to make you more dependent and sicker than you've ever been.
Yes.
Without dying.
Yeah, go ahead and read that last little bit.
And eventually die from it.
Yeah, read that last little bit about collectively.
Say that again?
Yeah, read that last little bit about collectively. They collectively are very skilled. Right, see that right there under the notes?
Right there under the notes. They say they are collectively are very skilled in doing great harm to non-white people, and then it gives examples.
Yes.
Killing, maiming, robbing, raping, spreading disease and poisons, etc., while sometimes being among the first to offer sympathy, sorrow, and repairs. See, after they cause this damage, they come around and say, we'll repair the damage that's happened to you. Happened to you? How did it happen? Because I did it. That's how it happened. But now I'm going to repair it. They also sometimes are among the first to offer so-called help in finding who is and who is not guilty. Oh, yeah. They'll do that.
Yeah, the art of deception.
Yes, the art of deception, the art of war.
Wow.
So they're the best, they're the top warriors that has ever been witnessed in recorded history. Nobody makes war better than the white supremacists. They are experts.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that out because that was really a point to be made. Probably the last Gmail today is from Babatunde. He says this, Mr. Fuller, how are black people a waste people? Aren't the white supremacist racist suspects the ones that are the waste people, being that they are most capable of producing justice and deliberately choose not to? Is that the epitome of being wasteful?
Of being wasteful?
Wasteful.
Oh, waste.
Yes.
W-A-S-T-E.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes. They are the greatest producers of modern technology, but they are also the greatest makers of waste. And they waste people. Oh, boy, they waste people big time. They take people come out of the womb who are non-white, and they take these people and deliberately make total junk out of people, which is what they have made of the non-white people whom they have encountered. They could have improved the people, but they looked at the people and they decided, I'm not going to improve these creatures. I'm going to make them worse than they were, particularly in the head.
Wow.
All right? And so black people now are useless people on their own, completely. Whereas at least we could do something on our own. A lot of it didn't make sense. We had wars and fights among tribes and all this type of thing. But the white supremacists came and said, we're going to improve you. They did not improve us at all. They made us worse in the mind, and here in 2019, even making us worse than we were in 1920. In our behavior. We have some of the worst behaviors you'd ever see among any people. And it's all been generated by whom? The usual suspects, the white supremacists. They don't try to improve us, but they put us under the guise of doing so, which is even worse, because they use deception to have us do stupid things under the guise of it being an improvement. And just like someone said at the beginning of this program, this anything that they can do in the area of the eighth area of activity, as the textbook says, sex. They got black people just glorifying pure nonsense, and coming up with newer and more refined ways of doing so. Like this is an improvement.
Yeah.
Whereas they can't show anything about it that's an improvement.
Yeah, that new six term.
But they glorify it.
Yeah, binary, whatever that was. Woo.
I mean, or whatever that means, and whatever it's supposed to do. What is it supposed to do? What is supposed to be the result of it 1,000 years from now? Can they project that while they're doing all this talking? How is this all supposed to play out as an improvement? See, but they have always said, take this, they told the Indians, drink this fire water. That's going to improve your thinking. It wasn't an improvement at all. It was thrilling. You got a lot out of it as far as how you felt at the moment, but the disaster that it left behind. So we should be suspicious of anything that they come around with saying it's an improvement. And the textbook for victims of white supremacy is supposed to give us a guide in doing this. Go to producejustice.com and get the textbook. There might be some things in there that will help you not just talk about what this problem is, which is what we do mostly on these programs, but what the individual person can do on a daily basis about it.
All righty. That's what we have to leave it at for this week. TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio the way it should be heard. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com.